it's sort of a half-half study of animal, sort of, the way that animals move, and also the way humans, because as I said earlier about the importance of function as well as form, you can never go too far by just approaching the animal's movement when a human is going to ultimately be the force inside the costume. Because I'm someone who's working, exclusively in fabricating actual costumes that could be used in film and TV and theater, it's always important to remember that if you're doing a creature that has a certain kind of motion and there's no way a human can leap that high, that you're going to design and also hopefully script the creature to be used in a way that is believable. Like you suggest a flying through an effect, through shadow, or through it happens off stage or something, or a cutaway to a project sequence. But you have to make someone believe that this is a bird at rest. And if you do that really convincingly, and then suddenly the lights go out and we hear the fluttering of wings, we believe you flew out of the room. So it's almost like you just need to know how you can merge with the physical attributes of the character. So the study is intense. I will have my students really study the qualities of the characters that they're using, that they're sort of creating a hybrid. None of us fabricate a pure dragonfly or an actual moose or a lizard, but we're making these hybrid creatures, and part of the formula is always the human being, how a human works. And we have to respect gravity and obey the laws of, of like how things actually work in a real world. So it's a huge mistake to try to create the hummingbird-like movement when no human can flit about in that way. The results would be sort of disastrous or just create this new problem. So instead, it would be like, what could move like a hummingbird on the character? So it could be like you have these quick moving little fluttering parts of this character that suggest that it can move very quickly when it needs to. But in this moment, it's eating something that's very difficult to digest. So you build the context around the creature so that people can imagine what they don't see. It's kind of like being a magician. You have to make people believe that something happened that didn't really happen. And because I'm coming from a theater background mostly, I'm working in a medium where the audience completes the illusion. Without the audience, it's not happening. So when an audience creates the synapse between, the device and the set design and the music, and it all kind of comes together, they feel satisfaction that they helped imagine what wasn't on stage. And I think this works in some of the best films that had creatures. I mean, whether it be not seeing the shark in Jaws for as long as you do in the film, or the original first Alien film, where the whole movie you're just wondering what this thing's physical body actually is. I mean, you don't ever see it until later on, and you're seeing it in small pieces, and sometimes it's just the effects of what the creature has done is giving you information about what the creature is. I think that it's so easy to take for granted how little has been shown in the best creature movies. And sometimes the most amazing moments are when the protagonists enter the room and, oh my God, they're in the room with the beast, but it hasn't noticed them yet. And it's just breathing, and it's a long shot of just this huge, breathing motion, and it's sort of about to wake up. I mean, people are fascinated with that latent energy, that power, that if the camera suddenly zooms out of the room and we hear screams and things breaking, we are imagining the carnage. And we feel like we've seen that creature do that work, but we haven't. And so I'm very into, I'm not like really into like the creature is it. I really feel like all the elements have to create a context that make this creature great. And that's why it's so important that everyone's on that same page. Because if you deliver a prop and it's used badly or lit wrong, it's really not your fault that it doesn't look good. And someone who's really delicate with the rest of the production qualities can make magic out of a simple sock puppet. I think that That's how it works. When a student has almost gone too far, where they've just studied everything about the animal, about the references, and they're really caught up in wanting to deliver and be true, and pure to the animal's qualities, it becomes a new problem. My challenge then is to sort of push them away, push them back into look, in the end, you're making something up. You're not recreating this animal. That's a different pursuit altogether, and it's probably done better in a different medium than the one that I'm teaching. I'm always saying, drop the person, drop your human form and its limitations. Let that be an advantage, because it's going to create a design solution that's going to invent something new that, in a way, is better than the pure animal. Because if you're sort of making, like a wolf-lizard hybrid in a movie, and you're really trying to make it wolf-like and lizard-like, and you really succeed, it will be wolf and lizard-like. What you're really trying to do is you're trying to create a creature. And if you think about what that means, it's like an invented life form, really. So you have to throw in this third quality. So there's the wolf and there's the lizard, but there's this abstract in between, which is the human being, which is trying to morph these illogical concepts into one. And you can give it logic if you obey the laws of gravity, of limitation, of knowing that you're trying to do the best you can with what the materials you have at hand, and instead of that being a limitation, you just go crazy with what you've got, and you push it to to its furthest and best, frontier. So I think that the best solutions are always some mistake in motion. It's always like, this was a sort of a reject, but it had the most personality. I'm really inspired by, just the surrounding world. I love just observing my surroundings, and I feel that the way that I've always processed the inconveniences or the challenges, the setbacks, or the absurdity of life is to look at it and sort of see the ways in which it just seems like a film, like it's sort of a scene in a movie, that it's so crazy or funny or twisted. I look at things that way, and I'm always sort of taking notes about how to use that in another time. So when you live your life as if you're working on your great novel, or I'm going to use this one day, it's going to be in a song or a movie, it takes you outside of being purely just a participant in the experience of your own life. You start to kind of be your own director. You're watching this from the outside and saying, I'm in this situation, and this is happening to me right now. I'm being held at customs, and they're going through my bags, and they're holding up my underwear, and oh my God, this is actually ridiculously funny. I'm going to miss my plane, but that'll only make it a better story. And suddenly you start picturing yourself later on making the story sound even crazier than it is, and you start to smile to yourself. And so the inspiration for me is to look at not just situations, but objects, people, animals, forms in the same way. Everything has other qualities. So like you see a face, but you can then just imagine it like with a third eye, or imagine if that person had different sized glasses, or if they had an eye patch, they would look like this person, or imagine a beard on that lady. How weird would that be? So I'm basically kind of just constantly photoshopping, changing, looking at things, imagining people as characters. And so when I look at the world around me and I start finding really cool underground comics, or like strange independent films, where I feel a kindred spirit to the filmmaker, or to the project, where, my God, they're taking the nuances of conversation and they're heightening the weird pauses in between to kind of show that you'd never know that was real life. People really do talk this way, or, I'm a real big fan of a lot of playwrights, but what comes to mind is like Harold Pinter, English playwright who famously used pauses, to create tension in his characters, and little dialogue where someone is just talking about something about their cup of coffee that morning, but really it's a scene about wanting to tell someone that you're seeing another person and you don't love them anymore, and talking about the particular love of the coffee cup design is like a way of saying you're rejecting that person in some way. You know, when these things happen and you realize that it's actually very realistic, it's just being brought to your attention because it's stylized. That kind of observation, that kind of creation, that kind of artwork, musically, physical pieces, paintings, anyone who has that perspective, if Edward Hopper makes you really feel like that's being up late, looking at that painting of that diner, I feel like that's 4 a.m, and I feel like I'm sitting right there at that stool. That's all just part of what inspires me, is that different artists, people who've made observations at how absurd the surroundings that we are in really are, and how we've just chosen to think that this is reality. And as soon as someone with a different perspective comes and sits in this room, they're looking at like everything else that I'm taking for granted in a different way. And if they don't know the door to this room is the exit, but actually the kitchen, then we're sitting in a dining room. And then I'm going to start thinking about what will be served here, because that table, is probably for eating, just because I don't know what's behind the door. And so I love following that form of thought. But if I were to list what it like the things I've seen that inspired me, my God, there's so much. There's different cartoonists, different films, different music that have just blown my mind, albums which I've listened to and at first thought, oh my God, I don't know what this is, and then you realize that you've just learned to listen in a different way, because an artist that you love has taken a risk. Like I remember listening to Talking Heads' Remain in Light or something, just one album of many different artists, but we're like, where's the Psycho Killer guys? This is a different thing. And hearing the old songs have changed, different percussions, different rhythms, and then later loving that and realizing I just got educated to hearing things differently. So I think that's the responsibility of anybody who's making films or creatures or whatever they're doing, is that they have to push beyond. And that gets back to my point about not recycling creatures that you've seen in movies. It's almost sinful. It's almost like a disservice to everybody. You just have to go forward and respect what's been done, but everybody who's done something before you took a step, and it's your responsibility to keep walking.